Right, thanks for everyone who's joining this afternoon. Obviously, I can't see you all sort of filing in, so it's always one of those slightly weird moments where I say hello, good afternoon, hope you've had a good day. Know how busy it is at the moment, but I can't see any of you, so we'll just it'll be a silent response. But it's lovely to see you all anyway. Hope you're doing all right. We'll just give ourselves a minute or so, and then we'll get cracking for the half an hour session we've got today. Okay, lovely. Well, we'll get started. So thanks very much for joining us this afternoon for the webinar around how on earth schools are finding ways to fund all the things they've got to fund and tuition at a time that's pretty crazy all round. So thank you very much for joining, and hopefully you found this session useful. In terms of who's here, my name's Richard Angus. I'm the Director of Education Partnerships at MyTutor. Been here for many moons, pre-national tutoring program as well. So seen it done in a lot of different ways, but it's been a really interesting few years as well for us and for the schools we work with. This afternoon, we're also going to be hearing from a really fantastic panel of speakers. So Nicola Pearson, Senior Deputy Head at Park Vale, Amy Hulston, who's the Assistant Head Teacher at Earl's High School, and Greg Hand, Vice Principal at the De Ferrers Academy. So we've worked with some of these schools for many years, some of them for a year or so, and they're going to be sharing their experience of using tutoring to support their students post-pandemic and other things that they're doing, and how they're planning on using funding in a very tricky year, I think, and how they're using it successfully. So I think out of the horse's mouth, pardon the expression, is a much more useful way of running through it. Also like to say thank you very much for everyone who's joined today on behalf of our charity partner, Magic Breakfast. So on top of the £5 for everyone who signed up, we're also donating an extra £5 to those who are in attendance. So really pleased that they're our official partner for this one. So thank you very much for coming along, if only for that bit. So what we're going to cover today, a few bits. So we're going to do a bit of a dive into the state of funding, some insights and research we've conducted with Teacher Tap and some of the stuff you've probably seen in the news. And we're going to do a bit of a breakdown of the money pots available across primary, secondary and sixth forms. Then we're going to hear from our speakers, who will share why they chose to do online tutoring, as well as how they're managing funding, things like this year. We'll finish with Q&A, and this is a pretty tight 30 minutes. So we will either do the Q&A live, or we'll make sure we'll collate those questions and get the answers out to you. We're also putting together a funding report at the end of this anyway to send out, and we're also setting up chats, funding chats you can have with us directly. So we'll share out contact details and things like that, but we'll try and get to what we can get to in this half an hour. So why are we here? Let's start with that bit first. So, the reason we've set this up really is that we're hearing from a lot of schools about trying to understand, really, in a world where it's more challenging than it has been previously, and it's always been a balancing act to manage the day-to-day running of schools with additional support for those who need it academically. Obviously, the headlines are the headlines, but also we've seen lots of research out recently about this. I think what we're trying to focus in on is how schools are prioritizing where to have the most impact, where to everything that needs to be done needs to be super valuable, and how people are starting to apply that. So that's why we're here today. With this survey, we ran a survey with Teacher Tap, and also we've got some national associations of head teacher data come through. I think we've talked about this idea that 81% of people think that this is the worst cost crisis in living memory, which is a cheery thought of a cold and dark Thursday afternoon. But I think this point is that we know there's a big gap, but actually we know there are trade-offs to make, and we're not. And so there's a bit of uncertainty around accessing certain funds, but also people are unsure about exactly where they're going to head and where the value needs to lie and how they need to do things. So you can see this gap, and also still a direct concern for where students are going to end up. And so that balancing act is really real. So what prompted us to have this conversation MyTutor, we're an established online tutoring provider. We're the largest in the country, in the UK. We've worked with 1,300 schools now since 2016, way before the pandemic brought in the national tutoring program, but lots of different ways in which schools have worked with us. Our focus has always been trying to make tuition available to everyone. So disadvantaged students primarily wouldn't ordinarily be able to access it outside of school. And so we've been really proud of the national tutoring program and our involvement in it. However, it's finished up and however that's sort of ongoing, the access to tutoring and the widening of access has been something we're really chuffed to have been a part of. But we speak to a lot of schools daily who are trying to really hard to make the most of all the funds they have available and tessellate and collate everything in the best way possible. And that's why we're here. So we work right along from primary up until sixth form, and we tend to focus on those students that need to cross certain grade boundaries. So there's a bit of detail about us there, but we've been working for many years now. So this year, I suppose, this is very much at a glance. I want to dive into the speakers because there'll be better detail coming out from there. But with the National Tutoring Programme, the grant is now paid directly to schools. So whereas before it was a at point of purchase type of situation, now the grant is paid in, like the schools-led tutoring fund was last year. And that can be used for tuition, academic mentors, a school's own staff. The subsidy is up to 60% or £18 per hour per student. So it's not per lesson, it's per student. So if you have three students in a lesson, you get 3 times 1080. And so that's the detail about the NTP. That'll get clawed back at the end of this year. I don't know how you folks manage with the schools-led tutoring grant, but I imagine it will all get used up in some way. But it does get clawed back if it's not utilised. So the other budgets that really are worth thinking about are pupil premium funding and recovery. So both of them can be used for a range of initiatives. We always used to be a pupil premium style organisation. That's how we were funded. But pupil premium can still be used with the NTP as normal. Recovery premium can't officially be used to top up tutoring. We've had some schools that have looked at recovery premium using to 100% fund tutoring. There's lots of different ways you can do it. But the main piece is that not being able to fund the 40% is the main caveat there to know about. Just a quick one on 16 to 19 funding. Allocation criteria for 16 to 19 has actually broadened this year and includes students that got a 6 and below at GCSEs. If you used it last year, you'll get it automatically. If not, the deadline to apply has already passed. Not super useful, but you'll get to apply again for next year. Also clawed back if not used. And for different sixth forms and different post-16 providers, it's been some have received a lot more cash and some have received less with the new criteria, and happy to share those round. So, bit of a whistle stop, but want to focus on the speakers today. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Nicola Pearson to talk us through your presentation, and please just tell me to jump slides and I'll do that for you.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Afternoon, everybody. So I just really want to talk about what it's been like for us in our context. We are what I would say is a very typical inner city school. So we high numbers of disadvantaged pupils, 50%. And then the other thing for us is we have quite a lot of pupil mobility as well. So students transferring in and out throughout the years that makes things difficult. We became a new academy in 2017 and we did a huge amount of work, particularly as part of our pupil premium strategy, on really raising outcomes for disadvantaged students. And actually in 2019, the last time that we had official exams before COVID, we've made tremendous progress from our starting point, and for us to have been beat in the national like for like was huge for us. But as an inner city school, attendance has always been an issue for us. We do have to battle with engagement, and that can be students and actually sadly families as well. We do see a lot of students with very low literacy levels and behaviour. And then, as I'm sure is the case for everybody, COVID hit and all of those things, all of those challenges that already existed, they just became so magnified for us. All of that work we'd done on sort of standards and routines and building everything in school, it was just so hard to keep a hold of while students were out of school. Next slide, please, Richard. So when we came back, we really sort of had to focus on this idea of commitment to learning as part of our engagement strategy. We've really looked at attendance, and I'm sure people from other schools are aware that the DfE are already doing a pilot. Now, we're not officially part of the pilot, but a school in our trust is, and so when we're mimicking that, we are doing everything we can to push attendance, and it's become the role of everybody in school. And then because we wanted things to start complementing the work we were doing online, we've moved all homework to be digital, and we've really looked at things like the reading and the SEN support, which really brings me, I guess, to sort of how it is that we've used NTP. So hopefully people get a bit of an idea about our school and the challenges we face. And then, yeah, next slide, please, Richard. So what we started to do was we already had things that we were doing that were quite typical of NTP even beforehand. So we were using academic mentors. In the first year of NTP being available, we were successful in getting another academic mentor to join. We used an awful lot of school-led tutoring as well last year, and particularly across year 10. And I think we were able to use that really successfully. And then in terms of working with the tuition partners, we had two main things that we looked at last year. So it was delivering English and maths to year 7 and 11. And we did that in PE time. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. And then out of school, we were using MyTutor to deliver those sessions online to students, and they were doing those in their own time at home. First year, putting it into practice, so much of it was a learning curve for us in terms of thinking about what was working and what wasn't. And then we have really thought quite long and hard about what our strategy looks like for this year. So if I can just go to the next slide. We stopped using the academic mentor, and that I'm not saying that that's not the right thing for everybody, but for us, that wasn't the branch that was the most successful, because actually we had a lot of work that we wanted to do to catch our students up after COVID. That was what NTP was for. And actually what we found with the academic mentor one was it was actually really time heavy in terms of the input that was needed from staff to then make it effective. The school-led tutoring worked well for us, and we will continue with that, but that is going to be stage 3 of what we do. So our main thing that we've continued to do this year is to deliver to 7 and 11 and to use tuition partners. And then anybody that doesn't access that, we will be picking up via the school-led tutoring, and they will be working for us on our reading and on our literacy. And I think really what I want to try and do is explain how we've approached it and how we've identified that. So if I go to sort of the next slide, and this is the key thing for us, I think it's brilliant in terms of what is available out there, but you have to really think about how to make that effective. And I think the key thing that became a starting point for me with looking at the guidance was, in school, if you are going to be getting students to access anything with tuition partners, then that's got to be more beneficial than where they're coming from. And actually, quality first teaching from our own staff is key. So the first thing we decided was that on the whole, we would not be withdrawing from the curriculum, because we just felt our students need to access those lessons. So we'd got to then think about, though, the problem for us, engagement and attendance, was it's all very well then sort of thinking, well, that's fine, we'll do everything out of school, we'll do everything out after school. It wasn't that easy for us to target those kids. And I think, again, I know lots of schools have talked about the problem being that we want to push this towards disadvantaged. Those are the children that are the most in need, but actually they're often the ones that are the hardest to reach as well. And that was a real starting point for us in terms of thinking about how do we make sure this tuition gets to the students we most need it to reach. So our approach has been, we start by thinking about, well, who are the students that need tuition, regardless of whether or not we think we can get them? Who are our students that most need it? And we look at year 7, we look at 10 and 11, obviously we look at the UBAC students, and then we also look at those with low literacy levels, because obviously there are tuition partners out there that are really good at working with either SEN students or, for us, EAL students with that mobility that we have. Once we've identified who all of our students are, that's when we do a bit of a 3-tier split. And a lot of work has to go in this in terms of knowing the students and knowing the families. We work out quite quickly who are the students that we can target in school through PE. And again, what we do is we work with the PE department to identify the students that are non-participants in PE, that are regularly not bringing their kit, or are, you know, quite willing to come out of PE. What we don't do is make anybody do it in PE time if they really enjoy PE, because we just felt like that was setting everybody up to fail. So that becomes our first route. And then we're able to get that tuition going really successfully in school time. And that becomes the easiest to monitor as well. We're sort of in control of it. We then think about the next tier, which is the students that, again, we want to target, but we're unsure if we'll be able to out of school, and we put that to the parents. So we identify who those parents are, who those students are, and we send out and we approach them all via Microsoft Teams and ask them if they would be interested and get them to sign in that way. So the idea being they've signed in. And obviously, you know, before all of that, there's a lot of information sharing, there's a lot of sort of flyers going, there's phone calls saying we would really like you to do this. And that's really dependent on the support I get across the curriculum, that we've all sort of identified those students. We've all said we will benefit if we can get these to sign up. We do get a good sign up. What is then key for us is making sure that they stay engaged, and that was a real learning curve for us from last year. And I've really had to work on the fact that it's weekly phone calls for us. We have to give the kids a slip the day before. We put announcements out on class charts. And one of the things I've done is I've used part of a support staff's role, and their role has been completely to support me in this, in making sure that we're looking at the attendance, we're tracking, we're following up the amount of pupils. We're then left with that really hard to reach, very small cohort, but again, students that really need it. And they're the ones we use the school-led tuition for. So it's our own teachers. And again, they're the ones that we fund through either reduced class sizes. For some of them, it's been withdrawal from options as a last port of call, but sort of thinking, you know, we really need to get them here, or period 6 if we can. But what we have found is that the hardest to reach ones, it's our own staff. So for us, I think the key thing has really been about thinking about which students to go down which route with. And then once we've established that, it was about the tracking, it's about the monitoring, and then finally it's all about the rewards. Positive phone calls home, and again, this is weekly. We send postcards weekly where we write up little quotes that the tutors have given. We give certificates, chocolates and vouchers, and we just make a real fuss of those students that are doing it. And we make sure that that's all fed back in the curriculum, back to those staff teachers, so that everybody is talking about it. So I appreciate that's a real sort of whistle stop, but I hope that just gives people a bit of an insight into sort of how we've established it and hopefully how we're evaluating it. And then just a final very brief point is just to say on the very last slide, and I'm conscious of time, so I will be really quick with this. It's all about that communication in school with the curriculum. So again, I meet with the curriculum leaders, the subject leaders myself. We agree the focus. We baseline ourselves at the beginning and end to see if we think they're doing it, and then we follow it all up again with Microsoft Forms for each student, and we could do that with the student and with the parent. And then the final thing to say for us, just going back to the funding, we've used PP funding. We have spent less money on trips because of COVID, and even because of just the difficulty in getting those booked than we normally would. So that's been where we've sort of kept a proportion of additional funding to pass over, and that's really helped us. That's really the pot that we've sort of been able to use to subsidise the 40%.
On mute. You think after 2 years I've learned. Nicola, thank you so much. That's brilliant. I love to hear that you're using like the tutor quotes that come through and like linking that back, because that's you said once that you used to give the kids cold hard cash. I'm not sure that's the answer, but thank you very much for your presentation. Obviously, with your permission, we'll share these out as well, so those tips do get passed on. Amy Halston now, assistant head teacher from Earl's High School. Take us away, Amy.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Richard. And thanks, Nicola. I feel like that was so reassuring to listen to you, because there was a lot of correlation with what I'm going to say following on from Nicola's as well. So I apologise if there's any kind of repetition, but we're utilising it in very, very similar ways, which is quite reassuring, I think. So next slide, please. Just to give you a bit of context about the Earl. So we are a mixed 11 to 16 academy based in Halesowen. We're part of a growing trust, Stour Vale Academy Trust as well. So we're quite a large school, but I guess we're kind of more average intake really. So we've got 23% pupil premium and 11% SEND, growing numbers of EAL students as well, which is an interesting demographic shift for us, but obviously poses kind of new challenges. So in terms of how we approach really our kind of drivers for improvement, you can just put all of that on, Richard. I know I went crazy with all of that during an inset I did previously, but this is very much about how the National Tutoring Programme fits into how we drive improvement, particularly with Year 11. So as Nicola touched on, really our kind of focus is on our high quality teaching, but for us it really fits into that targeted academic support, and obviously this is following the EEF model kind of for improvement really. So within that we have our learning mentor within school, which we appointed before the NTB kind of revealed the academic mentor route, and I'll touch upon that in a little bit. But the National Tutoring Programme has really become part of that kind of package of targeted academic support that we do offer, and we identify the students for that, and I'll talk about that shortly, through raising achievement group meetings that we have, where we're really focusing, driving the key performance indicators for the school. So in particular, the National Tutoring Programme and MyTutor has been used to look at the English and Maths 5+ borderline for us as a real key measure, and again focusing on pupil premium students as well. So our Raising Achievement group last year, we met with our leads for English, for Maths. We had a pastoral representation from the head of our upper school, as well as the year coordinator for Year 11, and it was very much about going through every single pupil premium student, looking at where they were in terms of their English and Maths, and really focusing on that matchup as a core group to begin with. And then from that we widened it slightly to look at students so where we could really push their progress for pupil premium as well. And obviously, as well as that, we have our wider strategies, because very similar in terms of Nicola, one of the things that we know are barriers for our students, particularly pupil premium, is their attendance, is their kind of lower literacy and numeracy levels as well for us. And what we are really noticing is their self-regulation skills, yes, both within classroom settings and actually outside classroom settings. So one of the things that we've done is really prioritise kind of pastoral intervention. So we have a pastoral support programs, but actually what I found really helpful with MyTutor and National Tutoring Programme is it has really helped students think about kind of their metacognition, their approach to the exams, thinking about their exam strategy and their self-regulation with kind of getting ready for that, because that is where we've really focused and prioritised, looking at Year 11 with some Year 9 and 10 as well, which I'll talk about shortly. So next slide please, Richard. So very similar to what Nicola was saying. So there are three kind of strands to this, and that's what we have really driven. So being really aware of who the students are that you want to support, I think is crucial. So as you said, we do have kind of very similar groups in that we have students that we know really want tutoring. It's a very established part of our school now. I'm being inundated with Year 11s daily asking if they can go onto the list, which is great, but also obviously a problem when you want to give it to everybody, and then thinking about actually what we do with them in terms of when it happens, when that's going to really maximise the amount of impact that we can have with those students. And I think for me, one of the things was, how do we know it's been effective? Because there is a lot of money into this, and one of the things that I was really conscious of is you know, if it's not having the impact, then what do we change? Or we don't repeat it if we aren't seeing the impact with these core groups of students. And I'll talk about the impact a little bit later. So next slide. So this is kind of the tutoring model that we have. So we have school-led tuition, which is done mainly through English and through one maths group. So our English staff were really wanting to do school-led tutoring to begin with, because they were very much dependent on how they were specifically teaching the skills for the English language. So you know, and as an English teacher as well, I can understand where they were coming from with that. However, what we noticed was that we did target students that we know needed to have had those relationships established early and push them into the school-led one, because they were more than likely to buy in. So MyTutor came in where we felt like we needed a bit more maths input. And that was something that we were really struggling with. So that's when we kind of approached MyTutor and said, can you help us with this? We went for the one-to-one model, and very similar to what Nicola was saying, we primarily withdrew from the PE, core PE time. We do also have a study skills period as well for year 11, and we also withdrew from that. And that study skills is very much about teaching the students how to revise, going into almost like the cognition and looking at actually how we learn and how our memory works. We teach them that so they can embed really good revision habits, but actually we found that it was more useful for them to be actually working with someone. So we had around 80 students of our year 11s focused in using MyTutor last year, and we had a really clear in and out period. So it started after our first PPE2, which is what we call our mock exams, our pre-public examinations. We identified those students at that point. We have our PPE3, which is their kind of third set of mock examinations in the March. So we had a really clear kind of in and out to see whether we had measurable impact with those students. So it was really good because they had sometimes up to 2 sessions a week. So it was quite intensive. And what we found was the students really responded to that actually, because they could see why they were selected because of their PPE results, and that was communicated home. And also they could see where that improvement was at the end. We also subscribed to the Easter sessions that MyTutor put on, which I found was really helpful, particularly with students that by that point were really engaged and they felt like they were seeing measurable impact and progress. And we utilised sharing the reports that the tutors offered after each session as well, shared those with home. Every 4 weeks we sent a report home to parents. They could see what students had been working on, and also the recordings I felt was really helpful, because what we encouraged students to do was to log back in and watch back when they could see from their PLCs what areas of maths they were struggling with. They would go back to that particular area and re-watch that lesson that they'd worked with. So that was really good, and that's something that we found was a model that really worked for us. So in terms of impact and whether we know it worked, which was something that I was really keen on obviously establishing from our results this year. So if you go on to the next slide please, what we noticed is that 79% of the students did increase from the mock examination point, and actually over a third by 2 grades or more. So within quite a short amount of time from when we put this in, because it's quite late in the year, to actually their results, we did see quite a measurable impact. And then what I did is I looked at the students that had NTP and MyTutor in particular, and they made a third of a grade more progress than those students that didn't receive tutoring. So that was for me a real impetus to be able to go to our finance manager and also to say this is something that we need to be embedding from here on out and prioritising when we're thinking about our finance plan for the next year. So if you go on to the next slide, we are actually, our plan for this year is to continue with maths in a really similar model. It worked for us. We're actually starting to use MyTutor for English as well. This has been something that I think has been really encouraging. Our English team have seen the impact and the buy-in from students to the point where they now feel like they can let go a bit of ownership and involve, so they can work with some students in a different way for us. We have prioritised when we naturally had some staff that left us, and we were thinking about efficiency savings, and we have used that to kind of think ahead and think we can use this to have a little pot ready to be able to fund this tutoring, which we know is working for our students. And as you said as well, Nicola, we have factored it into our pupil premium expenditure, reducing things like some extracurricular support that was there, which we know isn't happening this year. So that is where we're getting that kind of extra funding from as well. So hopefully that is, again, very whistle stop tour, but hopefully that's helped in some way. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy, and apologies. I think between you two, my internet sort of went a little bit funny, but thanks very much for that presentation. I love how from one year to the next, how much it can embed within a school, and actually the benefits you can have from continuing on from that base is really, really impactful. So thanks for sharing that, and a couple of tips on the way you're funding it this year as well. Much appreciated. Thank you for your presentation. On to Greg, Vice Principal at the De Ferrers Academy. Greg, thank you so much for joining us. Please take us away.
No problem, thank you. Lots has been said that I was going to say, so mine will be a whistle-stop tour. It sounds like we've got lots of the initiatives aligned there. So I'm currently head of school, vice principal, head of one of the campuses at De Ferrers. Go to the next slide, please. So I'll just give some context on our school. Is the next slide? Yeah, we go. Okay, so the Ferrers Academy, Burton-on-Trent, so we're a school in Staffordshire. We are the biggest school in Staffordshire, almost 2,500 students across 3 campuses. I'm head of this campus that I'm currently sat on. That's years 9 to 11, roughly 400. 410 is actually the pan intake, but we've got 1,200 students on this site, and very similar to the last presentation, we're 24% PP and 10% SEN. Next slide, please. Okay, so intervention sort of post-pandemic, which is what I wanted to first talk about. We're an Apple Distinguished Academy, so every single student at our academy has an iPad. Clearly, that was really, really useful for us during the pandemic, because what we could actually do was use our online platforms, and we could track work, we could intervene if students weren't doing the work. It was handy for us. That was, we used our catch-up premium to buy into lots of packages that were accessible for students and parents. Last year we had, obviously the same as other schools, recovery premium. We had school-led tutoring funding, and what we did was, with that funding, because it subsidised 75% of MyTutor, we went with MyTutor last year. We had some really, really good impact. And obviously, because the 75% came from school-led tutoring, we funded the other 25% from the recovery premium at the time, because you could. We actually utilised all of our school-led tutoring last year by buying into so many different MyTutor packages. We were using it left, right and centre, and exactly the same as the first presentation, we weren't robbing Peter to pay Paul. We were using our core PE lesson, and we were using our values lesson at times, so that we could make sure that we weren't hitting other subjects. Every opportunity we were throwing money at, so February half term, October half term, Easter, we were using lots of our pots of money to pay our staff to come, £25 an hour, on cost £32 an hour. So there were sessions going on primarily for years 10 and 11, but yeah, every opportunity we did, we offered sessions. We offered a PP Saturday school as well for year 11. So and we actually got the best results we've ever had here. So just shy of 70 schools in Staffordshire. Our maths results, for example, are #1 in Staffordshire in terms of progress. So obviously all these interventions, as well as, you know, first quality teaching, was really impactful. Next slide, please. Okay, so the use of MyTutor, for people who obviously want to know what's it about and what's the impact, is it's already been mentioned about the EF and the tier 2 intervention, that targeted support. It's old school closing the gap, we call it. We funded undergrads going back a few years to come in and work on some very short, high intensive, small group work. And the impact that they had in groups of 4 was absolutely phenomenal. We had kids going from E-minuses, old E-minuses, to C+s on the foundational maths paper within 4 weeks. So we knew that the MyTutor, the small group work, was definitely something that would be effective. But as we've already said, you need student buy-in. And for MyTutor in particular, because we're using it again this year, and the money that we are putting into that initiative, you know, you have to get multiple quotes. And there were cheaper options. I'm not going to lie about that. There were cheaper options, but the problem we went with MyTutor because the excellent service that they deliver, the tracking is absolutely brilliant. You know, you can look into the reports and the lessons. Communication with the team is really, really good. And one of the main things as well is that we've got so many different groups that are happening at the same time. They can support that, whereas some of the other companies were saying that they find it very difficult to do more than X, Y, Z on a particular time. Very flexible to working with the times that were suitable to us. And like I say, we could use lots and lots of different groups at the same time. So that is the main reason we went with MyTutor. If you know the service is good, you know, why would you change that up? So next slide, please. So ultimately, what we did was our year 11s, as I said, we got the best results ever. And we did a qualitative sort of response from it about what's it actually doing for the students. Clearly, there was academic impact because of the outcomes, and certainly the communication from the team and the communication that the students had from the team was really, really good. We noticed considerable increase in the targeted student confidence. They were more motivated because they felt like we were really supporting them, and it wasn't us, it wasn't the same faces that they're seeing every day. And it gave them reassurance that, you know, actually they were doing well, and ultimately could address them gaps. And we know that some of the students, particularly around the pupil premium, can be a little bit sort of reserved in classes of 30 and 32 students. So having that small group work where they were able to ask the questions and have that intervention, we found was the biggest thing for us. Next slide, please. So utilising the funding exactly the same as has already been presented. We are using PP funding to top up the 40%. We're using recovery funding for our own intervention. Obviously going forward, we've got a substantial recovery funding pot of money this year. So if it might be the case that actually if we're utilising the majority of our PP funding to top up the 40%, we will pay solely from the recovery funding. So we think it has that much of an impact. Main things from us is making sure that you've got sort of one person really oversees them budgets. So that's myself, so I know exactly how to map that out. We've got our spending plan, so we know exactly how to utilise that money. And like I said, we've already bought 120 3-to-1s, we've bought 30 1-to-1s. We've spent now on 80,000 already on this, and just shy of 50,000 has come from the NTP funding. So we're only topping up that 30,000. We've targeting year 8 in particular. We've got about 30 groups that are targeted for year 8 numeracy and literacy, and then the rest at the minute is solely focused around year 11. And again, we have 2 PE lessons a week at the Ferrers for year 11 because they have their core PE lesson and they have a NCFE cert in health and fitness. So ultimately it's a 15-week plan, and then they're in their coursework model for that, so that we could always mop that up later on for our open bucket. But yeah, it's been really, really useful, mainly the 4 and the 5 boundaries, particularly if they're getting it in one and not the other. And with nearly 400 kids in the year group, we've got plenty that we can be targeting. And that's me. Thank you.
Greg, that's glorious. Again, I'm like aware that I like drop out or whatever, but thank you so much for your presentation. I thought that was it's to hear that you've tried things in lots of different. I think I know you mentioned it as well, but the stuff going on holidays was fairly new for us. and I think that's it's been to be successful. So really long may the impact continue. The idea that is all really hope. It seems to be one of the reasons why people stay. So that's really lovely, and thank you very much for sharing, Greg. So in terms of Q&A, I can see a few have come through in individual messages and a few are on the Q&A piece. I think the best way to largely tackle these is to share. I'll just quickly. There's a couple of things we'll do. We've got one question that we'll send to you, Nicola, just now before we depart. But in short, we've got a funding report that we'll share around with you all, and whoever share that with whoever finds it useful, trying to explain it in plain English best we can. We've also got this idea of like a funding calculator. Basically, have a look at the school year and think about when you want to do things. It's very difficult to think above, the weeks to come. I appreciate that, but actually, where you look at that whole academic year, that like Greg was talking about, you can make it's a way of helping you to structure what might be a bit of a plan up until the end of the year exams like that. Happy to share that with you folks, even if it's just for your own usage with your own teachers. It's hopefully quite useful. We find it quite useful. And then also, we're really happy to have conversations about this because appreciate it's changed again. And I think that speaks a little bit to, and hopefully this is a positive answer, but Nicola, maybe give us a sense, and actually Greg and Amy, just give us a sense if it's a nod or a shake of the head. I suppose it's basically like, do you feel, Nicola, that actually like the national tutoring program's access this year has become more straightforward, similar, or more challenging this year?
What do you mean by access, Richard? Sorry.
What do I mean by access? Or what does Jared mean by access? Good question. I suspect what we can talk about with this question, I think, is like in terms of like how easy it has been to go, we'll grab that pot and we'll use it in this way. The way it's been distributed to schools, has that made this an easier thing for you to organise?
I think so, yeah. I mean, we were a focused school last year anyway, so we worked with Randstad as a focus school about it, because I do think initially, when you're first trying to get your head into it, there is so much information out there, and I think it's a big job for senior leaders as well, and I think having that recognised is actually really important. But I do think, yeah, I think the fact that they've tried to sort of streamline everything this year has made it easier. But I also think it's just the fact that it's a process that's becoming more embedded anyway. You sort of your own knowledge builds year on year, and you almost have to dip your toe in and just get going with it. And then the more you do it, the more you sort of understand. And I think the thing I found is there are always people you can ask. The companies like yourselves know so much that I just don't hesitate, if I'm not sure, to just ring somebody and say, am I right in thinking that I can spend it like this, and so on.
Well, yeah, hopefully that's been useful. We've had to study it like scripture in the last couple of years, so hopefully that's been quite helpful. Greg and Amy, you seem to be nodding there. Is that like largely your views as well?
Absolutely, yeah. The amount of questions I've fired over and got responses for, particularly this year, and like I said in my presentation, you're incredibly quick to support and respond, and it's supported us massively. That's why we've got every confidence in it this year of having another successful year working with you.
And for me.
Good to hear it. Well, thank you. It's very kind. So thank you so much. Appreciate you taking time out at the end of your day, and to everyone who's attended today for taking time out at the end of your day. We've got an email address there. Mine is just richard@MyTutor. If you wanted to send me a message as well, if that's absolutely fine. We'll send you a report. We'll make sure you've got a copy of the calculator, just so you can, if you want to plan out what a year of tutoring might look like, you can have a look at that, and we'll share that with you. Hopefully this was useful. I appreciate it's whistle stop, but we wanted to pack it with ideas and pack it with a few different ways of funding things, and could think of no better way than to have the session with Nicola, Amy, and Greg today. So hopefully useful. Best of luck in the trenches for the next few weeks before, in the run up to the winter holidays. But what a pleasure to see some of you folks who I've all had our heads down the last few weeks. Thank you so much for taking your time out of the day, and all the best for the weeks to come. Thank you for everyone who joined.
Thank you, Richard. I want to thank Amy and Nicola as well. They had some really good ideas, and I've nicked a couple, so useful for me too.
Likewise.
Yeah, same.
Good. Pinching, very much recommended. See you later.